Okay, so hi. I hated the way I introduced this, but this is my core values project, and I am so sorry. I am so awkward in this, but what you gonna do? All right, thanks, guys. Have fun. So my first one that I wanted to talk about was personal growth, and personal growth is really important to me because it kind of became redefined not too long ago. At the beginning of my sophomore year, I saw personal growth as something completely different than it is now. I always saw it as a linear graph where personal growth is only something where you only have good days and you only have good moments, and the bad moments aren't a part of personal growth. And um, now, having just kind of reflected on myself from my sophomore year to almost the end of my junior year, I realized that the lows are so much a part of personal growth, and they honestly have probably a bigger part in personal growth because personal growth is just, I feel like I've said personal growth like 20 times, but it's so important because it makes you into who you are. It's all about living and living, wrong and living right and accepting mistakes and accepting that you're not perfect. It has allowed me to make mistakes and be who I am and be human, and um, that's one of the reasons why I love personal growth, is because it's not perfect and it's not linear and it's really, really messy, but it helps you become a more defined and better version of yourself. My next value is vulnerability, and vulnerability is another really important value to me. Vulnerability, the way that I define it, is allowing ourselves to feel emotions and choosing to accept and share that with others, or share those emotions with others. Vulnerability, honestly, is terrifying, and it's always been something that I really have tried to value in my life, but it's still, no matter how much I try to be vulnerable and express vulnerability, and those are the same thing. Be vulnerable and to just appreciate vulnerability, it still terrifies me whenever, I am vulnerable. Vulnerability is just so important because for me it's the way to have true and lasting relationships, whether that be like friendships or family. It's where you kind of show the parts of yourself that are really scary to you and you allow others to see it. I feel like it has to be such a key component of who I am as a person because it's just how I interact with all my relationships. But vulnerability is just allowing yourself to trust others and to share parts of that of yourself with others. Because honestly, without being vulnerable, it's so easy, in my experience, to just explode because there's so much baggage in like the scary parts of us, whether that be like trauma or just hard things in our life, that vulnerability, while it's terrifying, it's necessary for yourself to thrive and for relationships to thrive. So the final core value I wanted to talk about was courage, and I kind of wanted to save this one for last because I feel like it goes hand in hand perfectly with personal growth and vulnerability. So courage to me, I define it as the absence of fear but the neglect of doubt. I think it's always bothered me that courage has kind of always had this reputation of being fearless and being, unafraid, when in reality that's not what courage is at all, at least to me. Courage to me is making decisions for yourself and only for yourself. Courage can range anywhere from jumping off a cliff to, telling people what they mean to you. And one way that one example I've had of courage in my life is actually cutting my hair this last October. For a lot of my life, I have been very insecure about the way that I looked and how I'm presented to the world, and I use my hair, or I did more back then, to cover up, or distract from the parts of myself that I didn't love. I had really long hair, and I really loved my hair. I still do. I loved it. I've always wanted to cut my hair because I've always had really long hair, but I always feared that it would make me look less pretty, or, people wouldn't like it, or, I'd be judged because who knows why. I just had fears. And one day, Jordan, who's in this class, came over to my house, and I was just talking about how I wanted to cut my hair, but I was nervous because I thought maybe it would make me look ugly, or I wouldn't like the way that, it looked, or I'd be scared people wouldn't like it as much. But Jordan really encouraged me that, if I want to do it, and it's not hurting anyone else, and, it might be scary, but I should do it because I want to, and it doesn't matter what other people think. So, within 20 minutes of that, I ended up cutting, like 5 inches off of my hair. I'm gonna show a video of that because it's funny, of just my family reacting to it. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, this isn't real.
We're telling her family right now.
Yeah.
Oh, look at J-pop.
What? What? Were we what? What are you going through? So obviously, people in my family were shocked because, like I said, I always had long hair, but it was so important to me to cut my hair because, I don't know, it's so silly because a haircut to a lot of people is a big deal. It's just, hair. But for me, I kind of used it as a defense my whole life. And it took a lot of courage to cut my hair, but it was the best thing I ever did. I gained so much more confidence, and I learned to love myself at this hair length just, even more than I did at the other hair length. And it was so important to me to make a decision regardless of what people thought, It was so based on my physical appearance that I wanted to prove to myself that the only person that, that matters to should be me. I think that's why courage is so important to me, because it's kind of redefined how I think, and it's redefined how I make decisions. I make decisions now for me. I try not to make them based on the fears of what I think other people will think. Okay, so some challenges about this assignment were that honestly, it's kind of scary to look at yourself when you don't really have an idea of who you are fully. I mean, I feel like these last couple of years in high school, I have discovered had a lot more self-discovery about myself and the person who I am and the person that I want to be. But I think it's just really scary to look at yourself when, you're not fully who you are, if that makes sense. And it's also just scary to look at yourself in general. Just going back to what I said about vulnerability, it's terrifying, even being vulnerable with yourself. It's really scary, and it's hard to look at the hard parts of you and look at the, not so nice things that kind of consume your brain. But yeah, I think that was the hardest part about that, is being honest with myself and being honest about what I think are my core values and why they're my core values, because it's just such a vulnerable experience to share who you are with people, and to do it just so upfront is kind of nerve-wracking. But yeah, I think that was a hard part about this. Reflection. I am really grateful that we did this assignment, and I'm really grateful that even though with all of the reasons why it got pushed back this late, that I was able to present this late. Honestly, I still, when I kept reflecting, because of how many times this presentation was rescheduled, I would keep looking back on my presentation and make changes to how my perspective on these traits have changed. And in doing that, I realized that I knew what my core values were when I was originally going to present this, but I didn't have enough experience with them. And I'm grateful for the experience and how I've been able to deepen my understanding of these core values. Because honestly, when I was supposed to do this, I had just recently, started living my truth and started living these core values. And I think the start of this project helped me to realize, okay, I've pinpointed what I want, to express about myself and what I want to show to the world, and I need to start living that. Being able to live my truth of personal growth and vulnerability and courage has been so impactful and made me so much more secure in the person that I want to be and so much more confident, and I'm really grateful that I was able to do this. The circumstances of me doing it in April, doing this presentation in April compared to November weren't great, but that is one thing about all of this that I'm grateful for, is that I was kind of able to look at myself even deeper than I was planning on.